we thought we'd just say a few things about Philippe. And I know Dinah's worked with him. You've edited his book.
Yes. So, in fact, I just checked on my computer, and it was March 2020, the beginning of lockdown, that I got an email from Philippe.
All right.
Saying Nick Pohl, who's a member of New Energy Work and a dear friend and colleague, Nick Pohl had recommended me to help him with his book.
Cool.
It's already in English, but that's not his first language.
Right, I see.
Because he's Belgian and speaks also Japanese and Swedish. He's a man of many
languages.
Yes, and languages, yes.
Yeah.
And so my job was to help with the English version.
All right.
So polishing is what we usually call it. We're polishing the English.
And here it is, fully polished.
This is the book.
Yes, which you'll see referenced to.
Whoops. There we go.
Yeah.
Yes.
That.
So, and it was, thank you, Cliff.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Ampuku, the classics at the heart of Japanese bodywork. And it's his work, his own work, but it also includes translations from the Japanese of two ancient classics,
which he had mentioned in detail, actually.
Yes, he'll talk about
webinar.
them. Yes, Ampuku Zukai and the relevant chapters out of Anma Tebiki.
That's it. That's what he talks about.
Yeah.
So there we are. I got up very early one morning a few days ago to do the recording. You'll see me from in my studio at home, and there he is. There he is. He's one of the new team, a New Energy Work team, amongst all the other wonderful teachers we've got. And he works closely with his wife, who's Japanese.
Yes. So he lives with Hiroko in Fukuoka, but it's the most southern island of Japan.
He talks all about that in the webinar. You'll find out all about where he lives and how important it is and everything. Yeah. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the webinar. I'm very, very happy to welcome back Philippe Vandenabeele, all the way from Japan, back onto New Energy Work. He's such a lovely presenter, and we've had fun in the past doing webinars with Philippe. And I guess his book's very well known. His books are very well known. His online courses are very well known, and he's just so into the whole Ampuku thing in an amazing way. So thank you so much for taking some time, Philippe, to spend it with us and to share some of your knowledge.
Yeah, thank you, Cliff. Thank you for having me.
You're most welcome. Okay, so let's get the slides up and we'll see how we go. So here we are. We've got a couple of polls that we're going to run first of all, just to find out your experience with your own work. So the first poll is, do you use Ampuku techniques in your treatment? Okay, so I'm going to put the poll up now. So please vote yes, always, yes, sometimes, not yet, but I'm interested, and no. And what we'll do is we'll just discuss the results in the chat, because this is a recording. Because of time differences, we've had to record this webinar just this one time. So that's poll 1. And poll 2. Question is, do you combine your shiatsu treatments with other bodywork modalities? Yes, always. Yes, sometimes. No, I just do shiatsu. So again, if you'd like to vote on that, and we'll get the results up and discuss them in the chat. Okay, Philippe, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Cliff. So we'll see for the first slide. Yeah, the first slide, I just put a map from where I'm speaking to you. So I thought I'd do that because sometimes people don't have so clear the map of Japan in front of them. So I'm speaking from Fukuoka. That's the place who is quite close to South Korea, if you look at the map. Actually, for me, it's closer to go to fly to Seoul than to fly to Tokyo. Tokyo is completely in the right corner, the right upper corner of the map. And then if you look to the left, there you can see Shanghai. So you have an idea from Fukuoka. We have almost every day, we have a boat who comes from Shanghai. So it's one night on the boat. And Fukuoka is an international airport who is connected to the major cities here in the east, but also to Finland. And before it, there was also a straight connection to Amsterdam. So straight connection to Helsinki and a straight connection to Amsterdam. I think for the moment after COVID, the Amsterdam direct connection is not running for the moment. So I hope soon it will be possible again. So one of the reasons I put up this map, because recently I had someone I was talking to and they asked me, where are you living? I said, I'm living in the South Island of Japan. So the island you see Fukuoka on and Kumamoto and Nagasaki, that's the island of Kyushu. So I told that person, okay, I'm living on the South Island. And the person was very surprised and he said, okay, oh, you're living on an island. So the person didn't realize that, Japan is islands, is archipelago. So that's why I thought, okay, I put a little map so everyone knows where I'm talking from. And then I wanted to show you a little close-up to Fukuoka and to show the bay of Fukuoka. So when you were moving to Fukuoka, my feng shui master, my feng shui teacher, told me, yeah, it's a perfect place to live because it's I think it's the Mount of the Dragon. Yeah, that's how they see it in feng shui. And yeah, Fukuoka, the old name is Hakata. So Hakata Bay is a place who has a long time been the entrance port to Japan. So before Nagasaki became the entrance port, Fukuoka for a long time was a place where people entered or left Japan. It's also the place who has the first Zen temples, the first Shingon temple. So when Kukai came back and introduced esoteric Buddhism to Japan, that was through Hakata, it was through Fukuoka that they came. And we have had 2 invasion attempts from the Chinese, or better said, from the Mongolians. And that was in the 13th century. So the first time they came and they came some distance into Fukuoka. The second time they were better prepared, and then they had made walls that you can still see. On the seaside, you have the walls who protect for back in the time, the Chinese invasions. So that's a little bit history. So I wanted to give this context that people know this. So it was the place where the diplomatic quarters were, the Korokan, and that was already in the Heian period, and actually before that all the diplomats who entered Japan, they had to stay in one area. They were not allowed to come out of it and adventure themselves into Japan, but they were confined to one area that you can still visit today, and they have, you can see the archaeological findings. Okay, so that was a short introduction. I thought, okay, to tell you where I am. Some images, one of the shrines in Fukuoka. This is the one who is linked to the sumo wrestlers. It's the shrine of strength. So once a year they come here in November and they do their competition here in Fukuoka. So then they come first to the temple and they ask the kamis, for the gods, for strength. So one other place, so maybe I tell a little bit. This is a Zen temple we have in Fukuoka. And one of the graves is the grave of Kaibara Ekiken, who was a samurai physician, a samurai scholar, a neo-Confucianist, and he written many books. On the image on his, you can see the statue on his grave. There, next to him, you have all his books. And one of his books is very interesting for us, because there he talks about bodywork. Actually, the whole book is about Yangshen, is about nourishing life tradition. So he has written a whole book about it, and it was actually his last book he wrote. If I remember right, he was 89 years old. That was very old for the Edo period. And then he took time to write a book about how we can cultivate life, how we can help our body or system to live healthy, to live a long life. So he had the experience, and it's nice. The book has got two English translations that I'm aware of. You can see it on the image. I will put the information to the book. I can send the links to that maybe this time or the next time, because this time is like an introduction. The follow-up session will be that we can go deeper into the information, and if people have questions, then I can also elaborate more on certain aspects. Okay, so let's look into the book of Kaibara Ekiken, this wise man of the Edo period. So he talks about the wind techniques, so that we preserve our life. And then he talks about what we can do. It's all short advices he gives, how to live a better life. I think the next one is very related to our shiatsu, because there he talked that we should have every day, that sounds wonderful, that we should have every day someone massage our entire body. Yeah, I sign in. Okay, every day. Of course, he was a samurai, he was a nobleman, so he had the means to let everyone, maybe servants, who could give him every day an entire body treatment.
There would be a lot of work for us then, if that was true, wouldn't it? There'd be a lot of work for us.
Yeah, I hope everyone follows his advice.
Yeah.
So, massage your body from head to toes every day, and especially your joints. And that I find is a very clever thing to say, because actually when we work on older people, and my experience of getting older, the joints are the first places in the body that get stiff, that gets more blocked, that the chi doesn't move through so easily. So it's a very wise advice to, I know in the rest of his book he says, yeah, that we should move, that we should not sit still, and that's also a very wise advice that is very interesting for modern people. And we tend to sit a lot, not move a lot, and when we see that in our own lives and in the people who come and look for our help with shiatsu. So yeah, I think it's very wise. So then he says, each part of your body should be massaged 10 times. I think when he goes further in the book, he says, okay, if you don't have anyone who can massage you, at least you can massage yourself. The reason I put this old book from Kaibara Ekiken, first of all, because he is a neighbor, his temple is not so far from here. So I thought, okay, that makes a link to Fukuoka. And I like in my shiatsu to have this link to the past, to the physicians, the practitioners who have come before us, and to look what they have to say, and yeah, to get some inspiration from them. So we can look further. I go a little bit fast through the slides this time. Don't worry, the next time. So this was this is an introduction. So the next time we can take more time and take less slides, but go deeper. That's my intention. So when I talk about how I like to look to the past, maybe some of you have seen my article who has been published at the beginning of the year in the Shiatsu Society journal. And there I talk about touching the tides of our being. And that's how I work a little bit my development of Ampuku, how I work with traditional techniques, and that's my base, but how I include also techniques that I have learned more from the osteopathic tradition or from other traditions, more also from the visceral work and the craniosacral work. And that article there, I took one quote from Gustav Mahler, the composer, where he talks, tradition is not the worship of the ashes, but the preservation of the fire. And that's how I see it with shiatsu also. So we can look back to the past, but what I want to connect with in the past is the fire of shiatsu, the spirit of shiatsu. Not so much the ashes and yeah, it should be in this technique and this practitioner was first and this book came first in shiatsu, and in shiatsu you have to press like this or that. That I see more, okay, that's all very interesting to know about the history. But the most interesting thing is, okay, can we carry on the fire of shiatsu? It's not the idea to get stuck in the past somehow. So for those who are interested, we will put the article in the links so people can go and read it if they are interested to know more. So when we look to the past and when we want to translate the past to the present, why I put up this quote, so passer d'une langue à l'autre en apprenant, en traduisant, c'est s'aventurer d'une autre manière de faire passer le sens. So when you come from one language to the other and learning the other language, en apprenant et en traduisant, when you make a you bring it to your other language, it's like an adventure, because then you have to bring this sense from one language to the other. Toutes ces manières, lorsqu'on les frotte les unes aux autres, s'enrichissent So when you bring these different ways of working, of language in her case, then you get like a friction, and that opens like another dimension, because it's not always easy to translate. It makes you think, it makes you wonder, it makes you also sometimes frustrated, because, okay, I understand it in this perspective, but then how I bring it into the other perspective. So it's not always obvious. Okay, so yeah, when we look at one of the ancestors of shiatsu, so actually a person who already came in the modern time, but who coined the term shiatsu, one of the first ones. I mean, there are discussions about it. So that was in 1939. He wrote a book, and then some of our colleagues are quite puzzled by it, because he doesn't talk about meridians, he doesn't talk about 5 elements, yin and yang. What he does, so here we look in the book of Tamai Tempiki, we see that he talks a lot about anatomy, so Western anatomy, who was not new at the time. It had already come in quite early when Japan opened in the 1860s. Japan opened, so at that time there were already anatomy books that the Dutch had been bringing to Japan, and then more anatomy books came into Japan. It has been said by some that he put anatomy in his books because he wanted to impress on his colleagues. I'm not so convinced of that, because already in books before him, other practitioners introduced Western anatomy. I think more what he saw is that with the shiatsu techniques and with the Western awareness of anatomy, we could open up a new dimension in our shiatsu. And I don't have any proof of that, but I think, if I understand also reading books from the same period, that it was not necessary for them to talk about the Eastern way of looking at things, because that was so embedded in society already. It's like, I know from some other shiatsu masters who were very much occupied with the I Ching or with the other classics of Eastern medicine. So privately, they were a lot occupied with it, but they didn't see the necessity of writing books about it because it was nothing new. Everyone in Japanese society knew about the I Ching, so why write about it? We have to know that in the Edo period, the book that was most published was the I Ching. It permeated whole society. So why the necessity to repeat and to bring that theory to the foreground again? It was much more interesting for them to talk about muscles, to talk about organs, and to introduce that in the work that they were already doing. That's how I think it is, but I don't have any proof. I didn't speak with him, so he's not around anymore. Okay, I put some information here. That's where he talks about how working to the lungs, how working with the breathing techniques. And okay, we can go quite fast through this now. Maybe we can come back to it in the next session. Okay, yeah, these are some anatomy books who came in. This is, for example, Gray's Anatomy, who was just published before Japan opened. A few years later, it was already, we have a Japanese translation of Gray's Anatomy. So they were very eager to open up to the West. Okay, so this is a little bit older text. Actually, Tamai Tebiki is actually not the first one who talks about shiatsu or gave it its name. Actually, in 1930, we have this man, Kaisen Tanukura, yeah? And he talks about Oriental therapy combined with American-style osteopathy and chiropractics. So he's a little bit earlier than Tamai Tempiki. Of course, his characters, his uses, when you read it, it's also behind me, you can see a finger. The first character, Japanese character, is finger, but he doesn't use pressure, he uses manipulation or hand. So finger manipulation, secret techniques, method, we could translate it like that. So yeah, so he comes a little bit earlier. Very interesting. I put this image because we saw the image of Tamai Tempiki, who is almost the same. I will go back here. When you see here on the left side, we have the rib cage and the intercostal space. There is pressure that is applied. So this is the book of 1939, who is often considered the first shiatsu book. But in this book of 1930, we see the same techniques, and we see this man also talk a lot about anatomy. So who is the first? Okay, I lay that in the middle for others to discuss. The interesting thing is that we can bring this back even earlier in the history of shiatsu. And that brings us to the Ampuku. Okay, there is another man. I will not elaborate on that. He was in 1815. He is the first one that I could find in literature who was mentioned as a shiatsu practitioner. His books are also very interesting. Okay, but back to the Ampuku, or actually further back in time, the two books that we translated, and the translation of the Ampuku Zukai, the one on the left, we made completely. The Amatebiki, who is from around the same time, there we translated all the Ampuku techniques and all the Fukushin techniques. Fukushin, the Hara diagnose techniques in the Amatebiki. So actually I started first with the translation of the Ampuku Zukai, and then I came across the Amatebiki, who had also Ampuku techniques. So we were bringing it together in one book, who is like the older techniques of shiatsu, but who were called Ampuku, because maybe that's another interesting thing to mention, that Masunaga talks a lot about both books, and he saw those books, especially the Ampuku as the beginning of shiatsu, or at least, yeah, very important ancestors to shiatsu. That's how I got interested in it, and then got the books in my hands, and then we made the translation. Okay. Yeah, this is the translation. So the Amatebiki and the Ampuku. So all the 30 Ampuku techniques. Before we made the translation, I very much thought, because I had been reading in many books, that Ampuku, that you worked only on the hara. That's Ampuku. I was very surprised when I was reading the Ampuku Zukai that it was a whole body treatment, that you start first on the back, you work the bladder meridian, then side position, and then you come to the torso, you work on the rib cage, because you want to work first on the diaphragm before you work into the hara, in the abdomen. So that's something we discovered by translating this book. So in the book you get also the whole treatment. So the whole back treatment, the whole side position treatment, sitting position, also the whole self Ampuku. So when we look inside the book, these are the two first real Ampuku techniques on the abdomen. But if we look closer and when we look at the translation, and by the way, the practitioner who wrote this book, who wrote the Ampuku Zukai, he says, okay, we do all the other techniques first, and when you have enough experience, we go towards the hara. And when we come to the hara techniques, surprise, surprise, they work first with those two techniques that we see here. They work first on the rib cage. So it's a very broad definition of hara that they apply, who is not uncommon. Sometimes we define hara just the abdomen, but it can be defined much broader. And maybe we can, I don't know, Cliff, I'm talking.
Yeah, no, it's so interesting though. It's just amazing. Yeah, but go
on. Okay. You tell me if I have to go faster or
you just take your time, or we'll just save anything that we miss for later. I think that's the main thing. It's all so interesting. We've got 20 minutes left, so we'll just do what just do what we can, and we'll save the rest for later. Yeah.
Okay. Otherwise, we do 10 times more.
Yeah. But that is just so interesting. And it's so interesting to hear about the history, isn't it? The history and
yeah,
it's just so fascinating, and it's just so great because when I was training shiatsu, it was really the Ohashi book, Zen Shiatsu, were the main books, the main books at that time, and obviously there have been books written after that, but there wasn't really anything earlier than Zen Shiatsu that I was aware of when I started training. So it's just so interesting to hear. Yeah. So what have we got? This is from your book. This is
yeah. Well, actually, from the translation.
The translation, exactly.
Maybe I can. Yeah. Maybe I can say one more thing about the translation work, that comes back to the quote we were reading about this French philosopher. Is when I did the translation, and it took us 5 years to work on it, because the old Japanese, it's so complicated because so many characters are no longer in use, or some of the the old characters are no longer in use because language has evolved. So, but when I did the work, the image I got was like making a base camp. Like when you want to climb a big mountain, you want to go to climb Mount Everest. Then the first thing you have to do is you have to bring stuff up to base camp, and out of the base camp you can do some eventually try to go higher up. So, and that's the thing that the image I got. So I had to do first this base camp, make this translation, go and look into this old stuff, and also ask more experienced practitioners here, okay, how do you do this technique? How would you do this? And because we don't have the whole explanation, so you have to reconstruct it somehow. And then later, when I try to work it and introduce more the osteopathic techniques, the craniosacral work and everything, the internal trajectories of the meridians, the extraordinary vessels. If we have all these different layers of understanding, we have at least the base camp to go back to. And that was very important for me. And so maybe we can go to the next slides. I don't know. Here, yeah.
Okay, so we've got the video.
Yeah. Contact with the Hara first.
Yeah.
And actually I went back to the book because there I have the words of Shinzai Ota, the author of the Ampuku Zukai.
Yeah.
And so that I didn't miss anything, because the important thing is the left knee, because you make a contact towards the stomach 31. So you have actually, the first thing that you do is you make contact with the hip on the side and towards stomach 31. Then you make contact with the Hara. And when you have that contact with the Hara, you work with the side of the right hand between the ribs. And the pressure is downward, and then you open up towards the side. So it's a little gliding movement you make. It's almost that you cannot see it. So now I'm on the side closest to me. I start from the sternum and I open up towards the side. Of course, with ladies, I work around the breast tissue. And interesting to read the text is that he says, then you do this 30 times. So I did only a few times in this video. I think for modern people, it's already a lot. But in the Edo period, they had much more time. So they did it 30 times. And that's a very interesting thing. You see it also with Tamai Tempiki in his book from 1939. And then he said, okay, you do this technique and you repeat it 50 times. So it's very interesting for modern people, because modern practitioners, okay, we do 2-3 times and we think, okay, now we shifted the chi and we are happy to go to the next technique and the next technique. Those guys, they really took their time. Okay. So, yeah, the next technique, then you work with your fingertips. Actually, then you work both hands at the same time. But maybe we can save this technique for the next time, because there are there are some other aspects that I want to put attention on. So
Okay, sure.
yeah, we have also other techniques that we can go deeper in if people are interested. This is working stomach meridian, both with the thumb and the index finger.
Oh yeah.
Who is like actually also a reminder of the Big Dipper. So we make a connection in the hara, who is the microcosm,
okay,
and the stomach 25, who is next to the navel, has the same. The point has the same name as the one of the fixed stars in the Big Dipper. So it has a direct connection there. So here this technique is called bringing down the rebellious chi in the stomach. And the stomach chi, who has the tendency to go upwards. Here we want to bring the stomach chi downwards. So
interesting.
Yeah, this is one of the techniques in the Ampuku Uzukai. Yeah.
Would you like me to show the video? I can show the video if you want.
Yeah, okay. We can just look at this video.
Okay,
then.
yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk through it, or do you want to just do it silently?
Okay, I
talk
can
through it.
Talk.
Yeah, okay, so here we go. It's a little bit shorter, and here we go.
Yeah. So this technique actually reminds us of another technique that is in the Amatebiki. It's slightly different than this one. Here we have first my left hand, the thumb and the index finger are with stomach 25 and the middle of the microcosm. And then with the right hand, I start the stomach meridian just under the rib cage. And with the out breath, I apply pressure, both with my thumb that you don't see on this image, but it's there. So both with my thumb and index finger of the right hand, I apply pressure. Interesting, in the Amatebiki, we have a similar technique, but there you glide along the stomach meridian. I like both techniques and they enrich each other somehow. It gives another option to do the same thing somehow. Because that's an interesting thing with the Amatebiki. There you have, but also in the Ampuku Uzukai, you have certain techniques that he called shoma, and then you gliding, you really...
Well, like stroking, you mean, actually stroking?
Stroking.
I see, yeah. Like a massage, like Western massage in a way. That kind of thing.
Yeah, and also sometimes you stroke along the meridian, and then you lift at the last moment. Right. So there are also such a kind of techniques. There are also techniques that you make your fingers...
like flicking?
Flick. Yeah, you flick your fingers. Wow. I had never seen anything like that before.
Amazing.
It was very interesting to discover all those techniques.
Oh, so here's a picture of it, look.
Yeah, so there you have the stomach and the picture and the explanation of the points and so on. But I want to continue a little bit, because if people are interested, next time we can elaborate on that.
Yeah.
I don't want to go too fast, but at the same time, this time is to give an introduction. Yeah. Here you have from the other book, you have with the palm of the hand that you glide along the stomach meridian. That one I had forgotten, that's also in the book. Yeah, so these are images from the other book. Okay, here you have also the Amatebiki and the explanations. So it's like the name says, Ama shiatsu. Actually, shiatsu comes from ama. It's the same family. It's maybe still closer to the tuina that we know from China, because of course everything comes in Japanese medicine comes from China originally and got adapted, got refined sometimes. Okay, when we come back to my article, so then with those old techniques or traditional techniques, I bring it together with working more with the osteopathic techniques. And just as one example, actually one of the most easy organs to work with is the stomach, because it's easy to connect with it, to feel it. There are more nerves connected to it. It's more difficult with the liver. Liver, you have less feeling with it. When you feel inside, it's more difficult to connect with the liver. It's much easier to connect with the stomach. Same thing, it's more easy to connect with the large intestine than, for example, to connect with the spleen, for example, or the pancreas. All of the organs, it has been discovered by the French osteopath Jean-Pierre Barral, he's the man who introduced it, that they all have their intrinsic movement, their own movement. Can be compared with the movement that we know from the craniosacral movement. We have the movement of the bones in the skull, or the movement down in the spine and the sacrum. Every organ has also its own movement, and it's called the motility of the organ. Visceral osteopaths, they work with the motility, so they will help the organ to find more freedom, to help the motility just by very soft contacts. So they will just invite, I see it more like an invitation, help the organ to find back its movement, its original movement, its intrinsic movement, who is somehow an echo of the embryo stage, where we know that we had the digestive tract, who has gone through all kinds of movements, and the stomach has been turning and has become like one bag, somehow we can say. So that movement is still there for us to feel. It's like an old echo of that original embryo movement, we can say. Okay. Then next to that, in visceral osteopathy, they work also with the mobility of the organ. So we have the motility, but we have also the mobility, and that's the movement that the organ can make. So if I lift my arm on the liver side now, if my liver is very blocked, it will, and if my liver cannot move, it will restrict also my movement of my body, of all the tissues around the liver. So if the liver, for example, is very stuck, or now we have the image of the stomach is very stuck, and I try to move to my left side. Okay, if it's very restricted on my stomach side, if there is so much tension around my stomach, it will limit my body movements. And that's the movement of the mobility, they call it. Okay. Since I work with shiatsu, and since I work with yin and yang, 5 elements, and all the rest of it from the theory that we have, for me it was more logic after some time to translate it to the yin and yang movements. Because, and that's the same that when I work with craniosacral work, for me it's more easy to think the inward movement is more the yin movement, the outward movement is more the yang movement. And if we translate it in this language that is our shiatsu language, it opens up to a whole array of possible diagnostic tools that we have. Okay, if the yang movement is more restricted, what does it tell us? If the yin movement is not so pronounced, what does it tell us? So it becomes more an integrated way of working for me. Okay, I can understand for osteopaths, they call it inspire, expire. They have different names for this movement.
Philippe, we have to finish up.
Yeah.
We've been an hour now. The time has flown past. It's been totally fascinating as always. And I just want to say how much your work totally fits with the whole idea that we've got with New Energy Work, which is to go backwards in time, deepen what we're doing, and then to move forward, always exploring how these things can be applied. And it's just been such a fascinating hour. I know you've got loads more material, so I look forward to recording that in the early hours of the morning in England so that we can present it over the coming weeks. So I'll be in touch and we can plan out the rest of it. And I just want to say thank you so much. And
thank you very much.
And I'll be sharing, obviously, links to all of your work, to your books and to your online work on this webinar when it goes live. So thank you again, and really look forward to following it up, and we will go deeper and deeper. Absolutely amazing stuff. Thank you so much. I'm going to finish up now. Thank you very much.
Thank you.